big day in football with both the official college football playoff rankings coming out and the NFL trade deadline. We're taking a look at the latest there, plus a deep dive into how media uncertainty will shape MLB team values. Also, Tom Brady broke the Brady rules, the Pistons had to take the subway, and college basketball is starting. It's Tuesday, November 5th. It's Election Day. If you have not voted and you are eligible to, please do so. I'm Owen Poindexter, and this is Front Office Sports Today. In today's episode, we are talking football with my colleague David Rumsey. The Athletic's Drellich joins to discuss the systemic issues facing MLB media. We're also checking in on the Yankees' decision on Gerrit Cole and the latest on qualifying offers. Plus, we have stories from the NFL, NBA, and global soccer. Here are your top headlines. College basketball is back. The road to the Final Four began yesterday as men's and women's basketball programs tipped off their season openers across the country. We saw some of the returns and debuts of college's biggest stars, including Cooper Flagg, Juju Watkins, and Paige Beckers. With NIL, the transfer portal, and conference realignment, college basketball finds itself in flux between the new and old eras of the sport. Be sure to keep you updated on all things related to college basketball and the business of sports here on FOS Today. Sticking with college athletics, the Big 12 is looking to get a head start on the fallout from the proposed settlement between the NCAA and the House. The league circulated an NIL agreement template, which essentially spells out terms, services, payments, and the timing of payments to athletes, among other things. The template allows for schools to adjust NIL agreements to their varying needs, and even though the document sits at 20 pages long, it is still in its infancy and could undergo significant change. Over to baseball, the Yankees will keep ace pitcher Gerrit Cole, and weirdly they are doing it on the same terms that he just opted out of. Cole had 4 years and $144 million remaining on his 9-year deal when he opted out. The Yankees had an option to keep him by tacking on an additional year at $36 million, and now they are keeping him at the initial 4-year, $144 million deal he opted out of. The two sides are still in talks on an extension. Longtime San Antonio Spurs head coach Craig Popovich is out indefinitely after suffering an undisclosed health issue over the weekend. Assistant coach Mitch Johnson is set to fill in as interim head coach until Popovich's return. Popovich is 75 and is the longest tenured head coach in NBA history, 29 years and counting. With Mitch Johnson at the helm, we could be getting a look into the future for the Spurs without the longtime legendary head coach. Speaking of changes at head coach, the New Orleans Saints fired Dennis Allen yesterday after a 7th straight loss to the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. The Saints, who started the season with 2 wins, now find themselves at 2-7 in the bottom of their division. If losing 7 games in a row wasn't enough, the Saints lost their 7th game to division rival and fellow 2-7 Carolina Panthers. Losing a game to the Panthers seems to be reason enough to change up the coaching staff, as the Las Vegas Raiders, the only other team to lose to the Panthers this year, fired their offensive coordinator and 2 other offensive coaches on Sunday night. We'll have more on who else is on the hot seat in the NFL with newsletter writer David Rumsey right after this. I'm joined now by Front Office Sports newsletter writer David Rumsey. Welcome, David.
Hey, Owen. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on, as always. So we are halfway through the NFL season. Teams are making changes. Some are making trades. The Saints just fired their coach, Dennis Allen, after losing 7 games in a row. And you've been writing about this. They're in a rough spot, not just this year, but kind of next year as well.
Yeah, if you've been following the NFL for a while, you kind of know that the Saints have been notorious for building up cap space, salary cap space in a kind of unique way. Basically, they've been punting it down the road, pushing it off to the future. And in recent seasons, it's all been kind of time to collect. And if you look at next year alone, they're already over $77 million over what the projected salary cap is going to be, barring some cuts and other things. But they have a lot of guaranteed money, like with David Carr tied up. He's owed $50 million at least next year. So yeah, whoever is going to be coming in to take over for Dennis Allen is going to have a lot of work to do and maybe not a lot of salary cap space to play with.
I have to wonder, it sounds like they have to do something of a teardown, just given how they've managed this team. I even wonder if Carr could somehow get traded just because he's got his cap hit is like $50 million. So he's like the quick way to do it. But that means you're pretty much starting over if you trade him.
Yeah, and it hasn't really been stellar results. I mean, Dennis Allen was just 18-25 in his 2.5 seasons since taking over for Sean Payton, and that kind of coincided with the signing of Derek Carr with that $150 million contract, which is supposed to still go until 2026, but they could kind of get out of it after the 2025 season. But still, yeah, a lot of money, not a ton of success. So some hard decisions coming for the Saints at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I feel like we have to do this now with every coaching vacancy, but there is a certain high-profile coach who's, he's on the Manning cast, he's on Pat McAfee, talking about Bill Belichick, of course. Any chance you see Belichick making his way to New Orleans?
Well, the only team that he did interview with in this most recent coaching cycle after getting fired by the Patriots was another NFC South team, the Atlanta Falcons. So certainly there's going to be more interest in him, I would assume, this coming off season, especially after people have been seeing a little bit different, lighter side of him on all the shows that you mentioned. He's hard not to miss, especially if you have ESPN on, whether it's the Manning Cast, the Pat McAfee show, but he's in a lot of other media outlets as well. So yeah, I don't know if the Saints particularly, but I'm sure they'll kick the tires on him at the very least. And as we know, these are not going to be the only openings. We have the Saints and the Jets so far who have fired their coaches midseason, just 9 weeks into the season. We're barely crossing over the halfway point, like you mentioned. There's going to be more in-season firings as we get towards Thanksgiving and then Christmas and New Year's and the season's over. And then, as we know, about a quarter of coaches each year are out and new ones are in. That was 8 coaches last year were fired and new coaches came in. So I would expect largely the same this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a "what have you done for me lately" kind of league. What effect does that have just broadly to have these, such a rapid coaching carousel?
Yeah, I think it's a lot different than maybe people were used to 20, 30 years ago when maybe owners had a little bit more patience, and that kind of extended to the team too, when you would maybe sit your rookie quarterback for a season or two before throwing them out to the wolves and then benching them like a Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson, like we're seeing. But there's just so much money involved in the NFL that even if you give a coach like Dennis Allen a 4-year guaranteed contract that was probably worth well over $10 million at the very least, total money. I mean, yeah, the Saints are going to owe him a little bit of money this season and next, but that's really just an accounting error for these NFL owners who are getting hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in TV money revenue alone. So yeah, I think it's just kind of it's where we are. You need to succeed to keep pushing yourself to the next level in the NFL, and pretty much every owner is kind of looking for that next level, and not many are okay with just being below 500. Maybe some are okay with being at 500 or just making the playoffs every couple of years. But the Saints had a lot of success under Sean Payton, and this is kind of a new era for them, just like maybe the Patriots are going through without Bill Belichick, et cetera.
Coach is one place where they don't apply to the salary cap, so it's just, are you
Right.
willing to pay the extra money to pay one guy to leave and pay another guy to actually do the job? So yeah, it's one place. It's sort of the easiest place to make a change when things aren't going well, and often it's if you lose 7 games in a row, something's going to change, and it's kind of the easiest spot to tinker with. But yeah, I think we will see like some disappointing teams out there, like the Cowboys, the Colts, are not where they thought they were going to be at this point. So if they don't turn it around, I don't know specifically if those coaches are on their way out, but those are the sorts of teams you look towards when I mean, it's not just like the teams you expected to be bad; it's the teams you expected to be good who are having a rough year.
Yeah, there's always a couple surprises. You kind of know who might be on the hot seat per se going into a season, but there's always some surprises. And yeah, you have a team like the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. Everyone thought he was going to get fired last year, and now he's in the final season of a contract now, and now they're looking a little bit worse. But yeah, it's really interesting to kind of look and see how different owners do it. Some are very patient and like to give their coaches a long leash, like the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. A lot of consistency there, even if they're not, they're performing each year, but maybe not succeeding in the playoffs every year. And then you have others like, say, David Tepper in Carolina, who's gone through multiple head coaches in the past couple of years. And, maybe the Saints are going to be somewhere in between that.
Yeah, with the Panthers, it's kind of an annual ritual. Before we let you go, the college football playoff, the official rankings are coming out. What are you watching for here?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this on my most recent appearance with you, Owen. It's just going to be interesting once these rankings come out and we have the top 12 teams, and people are going to think, and in my opinion, a lot of casual fans are going to think, all right, there's the playoffs, the playoff bracket, the top 12 teams. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And it's going to be really interesting because you have the top four ranked conference champions that are going to have those first round buys, and then you're going to have everybody else that's going to be playing in the first round games, which I think are going to be really fun because those are going to be on campus games. So it's going to be almost maybe not an advantage to play in the first round, but really fun for whoever those four teams are that are ranked between 5 and 8 ultimately, and get to host the first ever first round playoff games on campus. I think that energy is going to be incredible. So I'm into it. It's going to be fun to see everybody's reaction to the ACC champ and the Big 12 champ and the Group of Five champ getting in. And it's not only going to be these SEC and Big Ten powerhouses. And I think, like we talked about last time, there's going to be chaos, there's going to be drama, there's going to be arguments, and that's what we really like as fans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. David Rumsey, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
As always, thanks.
13 MLB free agents received qualifying offers from their 2024 teams, including the obvious ones like Juan Soto and Corbin Burns, to the more borderline calls like Nick Martinez and Nick Pivetta. The QO is a one-year offer at a fixed price, which this year is a record $21 million. The system compensates teams that lose players to free agency who are good enough to reject that offer. Teams of players that reject the offer and sign elsewhere get a draft pick, and there are nuances based on team payroll and whether or not the player signed for more than $50 million. Since the QO system started in 2020, 131 players prior to this offseason had received the offer and only 13 accepted it. The system is less about the offer itself and more about establishing a market-based method for determining which players are worth some kind of kickback for losing them. It's not a bad system, but it is one of several band-aids that MLB has to try and create some parity in a league where there is a huge range in what teams spend on payroll. And when you look at the broader issue, this band-aid is not doing much of anything. The New York City Marathon took place over the weekend. Congratulations to Abdi Nagia, Sheila Chepkiuri, Daniel Romanchuk, and Susanna Scaroni for winning the men's, women's, men's, and wheelchair women's categories. The marathon is one of those events that people generally have a lot of good feelings towards, even though it is really disruptive to the normal life in the city. The Detroit Pistons experienced that when they had to take the subway to the Barclays Center for their game against the Nets. Fortunately, the train wasn't too crowded because with NBA players sitting on both sides of the middle part of the car, there wasn't a ton of room for people to pass through. That said, athletes taking mass transit is one of those small joys in life, and I wish it happened more often. It's a great way to see the city while you're in town, and for the New York arenas, the subway goes right there. It's often faster than driving, and it gives you a better feel for the city. And hey, correlation is not causality, but the Pistons got their second win of the year against the Nets. More athletes should do this, and more cities should have transit-accessible sports venues. Over to the NFL, sources tell Front Office Sports that Tom Brady won't be punished for criticizing the officiating in Sunday's game between the Packers and Lions. In the game, Lions defensive back Brian Branch was penalized for unnecessary roughness, and after a video review, was ejected for hitting Packers receiver Bo Melton in the head. Brady, as the lead analyst in the game, said, quote, "I don't love that call at all. Obviously, it's a penalty, but to me, there has to be serious intent in a game like this." That led to another judgment call. Did Brady violate the Brady rules, which prohibit him from critiquing the refs because he is part owner of the Raiders? Certainly seems like he did, but apparently that did not cross the line for the NFL. Either way, I don't really get what we're doing here. I'm glad he wasn't punished because I want him to be able to do his job to the best of his abilities. At the same time, that seems like a pretty clear-cut violation. When players step out of line, the league follows the book so that it's clear that there are rules it's enforcing. When the rules apply to literally one person, maybe they handle things through back channels until something really forces their hand. We'll only be able to really tell over time if Brady starts to censor himself on certain topics. As regular listeners to this show know, uncertainty around local media revenue is having a major impact on how MLB teams are looking at this offseason. But what is it doing to team values? The Athletic's Evan Drellich has been looking into that and the latest on Diamond Sports Group's bankruptcy, and he joins us next. I'm joined now by senior writer for The Athletic, Evan Drellich. Evan, how you been?
Owen, what's going on?
Hey, great to have you on. So you wrote about how many MLB teams are losing revenue from the change in local media. This could impact team values going forward. The Twins are for sale. What do you expect to learn from that sale whenever it happens?
It's the first team that's up for sale, I think probably in baseball history. I guess we can't say with absolute certainty, but likely the first team in baseball history that's up for sale with declining media rights. They were at about 54 million in 2023. They took a cut going into 2024, and Dave St. Peter, the president, says they're going to take a cut again in 25. They're with MLB now, as opposed to Diamond, who they were with the previous 2 years. And so it's a good test for the answer to the question, is the RSN problem, the Diamond Sports Group bankruptcy, all the woes we're seeing with these RSNs affecting franchise values. Is it anything meaningful in the long run, or is it, as Commissioner Manfred said, just a blip? So, we'll see how fast the team does or does not sell, but assuming it's sometime in the reasonable near future, it's a team that's going to be sold while MLB is its broadcast partner, not a typical third party.
Yeah, I guess it's a blip in baseball terms, the way, 10,000 miles is a short distance in astronomical terms. It's a blip, but it's a slow acting blip. That $55 million you mentioned, what percentage of the pie is that of the Twins' overall revenue?
Yeah, so the figure is 54 was the rights fee, and then there was another $6 million that was basically the prorated signing bonus with the network. So anywhere you could call it 54 million, you could call it 60 million. The MLBPA, the Players Association, told its players this year that the range of percentages of revenue that local TV rights account for is 21 to 32. So anywhere basically from a fifth to a third, depending on the team. And what is going on here is very club dependent. Some teams are getting hit a lot harder than others. Most of the big market teams, the Yankees and yes, are not going through this. But it's kind of highlighting some of the differences between the so-called haves and have-nots in baseball. But so it's not everything, to be very clear. And it's not as though these are total losses. If you're a team that goes with MLB is still going to sell your games to the cable and satellite groups. You're still going to get some amount of money from that, and you're also going to get some amount of money from the standalone subscription, which last year the teams that were with MLB, they were selling it for $20 a month or $100 a year, $100 a season. So there's still money coming in. It's not as though 21 to 32% of that revenue is entirely gone. You are taking some sort of reduction within that piece of your pie.
Yeah, I have to imagine the Twins would be one of those teams on the higher end of that because they're getting less money from, big sponsorships, maybe from national media. Brief detour over to the Mets, Yankees, Dodgers, the Cubs, perhaps. Are they completely unaffected by everything going on with Diamond Sports? Because they're not Diamond Sports teams. They've got their local media locked in. Are they just totally unaffected by all this media uncertainty?
Well, they're all in it together. And so I guess on maybe one level you could say that they're not dealing with it, but another level they're going to have to deal with it, which is if the commissioner and a large number of owners want to change the system, if they want to get to a point where baseball is selling some sort of national streaming package, are they going to participate? Is there going to be a system change, an overall larger structure change in baseball? In basketball and hockey, as I understand it, I don't cover those sports, but I've had to veer into this a bit. The league controls the streaming rights for those clubs. The TV locally, the teams still control. In baseball, the clubs control both of those things: the linear TV rights locally and the streaming rights. And so, is there a change in who controls those rights? Can the commissioner, without that change, get enough teams together to build a national package? And the number of teams whose digital rights the league probably would have access to at this point, I think it's creeping up over 10 now, and we might have some more news relatively soon here as the Diamond bankruptcy case plays out, and presumably some more teams will leave Diamond, and some of those presumably will go to MLB. It will affect the big market teams in some way or another. It's just not as direct an impact as, well, the Yankees are taking a pay cut at this moment. But there is a larger systemic question that will unfold here over time, because it's something that if you're talking about revenue sharing in baseball, that's a collectively bargained issue. So you're talking about CBA, you're talking about 2026 into 2027 negotiations and all the fun stuff.
Yeah, those CBA negotiations are creeping up kind of fast. On that systemic question, and there's a quote in your article where someone, I forget who, says, this isn't a baseball problem, this is an MLB problem. Or, sorry, this is not an MLB problem, this is a Diamond problem. And I think that's the case for it being a blip, is that this is one company, happens to be very integral to baseball, is going through this bankruptcy proceeding, but we'll get through it. People will keep watching baseball. The league will keep making money off of that. Do you buy that basic argument that baseball does not have a viewership problem and that does not have a revenue problem related to that viewership?
I buy it potentially to an extent with some nuance. The old cable model, the commissioner's been pretty publicly forthright about this. It was a very good model for baseball and for any team that was benefiting from it because everybody was paying into it. My grandma, love you, Grandma, she's turning 101. She is a cable subscriber. So she gets the Mets and the Yankees in New York City. She's not watching the Mets and the Yankees, but she has been paying, and as part of her cable bill for who knows how many years, to get those games. And when you go away from that model, even just in part, you're not forcing people to be inside the system. We talk about this streaming standalone subscription, the $19.99 a month or $99 a year, based on previous pricing at least. People can go in and out of that. You're not being forced to buy it unless you want to. It's actually much more of a free market option. So can a streaming model, even in conjunction with an old model, it's not like the old RSNs are all going away, not instantaneously. They're in trouble, but they're not disappearing overnight. Can you replicate that money in a streaming model? And that hasn't been there yet. The Padres had over 40,000 viewers or subscribers to their streaming package, but the commissioner said, at the All-Star game in July that the revenue's not there. And so how do you monetize it? How do you on the streaming side get there? Well, you put enough rights together, you appeal to a national major streaming company, right? A Netflix, and Amazon, Peacock, whatever, whichever one you want to point to. Netflix is making money. Peacock is losing a lot of money. It's not as though these streaming companies have all figured out how to make money yet. Amazon's kind of in its own boat because of all because of the ecosystem that it exists in, and Prime supports buying things, et cetera, et cetera. You can see a major streaming company, if baseball were in a position to sell, at least half of the teams, offering up a good amount of money. But you got to be able to get to the point with those rights. And, those streaming companies have to, over the long run, kind of justify it, right? You could get one big payday. And what if over time people look at it and go, well, not enough people are signing up. There's not enough money in it. So I think everybody believes it is going to be similar to basketball, where baseball is going to pursue some sort of national streaming package. You'll get that money. But in the long run, is there any downside to having a national partner as opposed to more local partners? Does the national partner presumably work in conjunction with the local partners? It doesn't have to be either or. You could have, your RSN as well as the streaming package available, but that affects the economics. So there's a lot at play there.
Yeah, and you mentioned Amazon. There was a point not too long ago when I felt like when they invested in Diamond, they're kind of part of the arrangement where Diamond was going to emerge as an actual media company from all of this. And I was thinking, okay, Amazon is going to be the new local broadcaster, and it's going to gobble up local rights everywhere it can and kind of position itself to be the new Diamond, essentially, at some point. Are they still part of this picture, and how are they factoring in here?
I think there's still conversations going on, and the company that Diamond would emerge as, assuming they are confirmed by the judge, that their business plan is confirmed and they do escape bankruptcy. Amazon could be involved, and you would be able to access through Amazon Prime, these games, but it would be on a tier essentially. You're adding a channel. As I understand it, the plan is not for somebody who just signs up for regular Prime to be able to have access to this. You still have to pay extra. And so basically Prime is just a portal. In the same way now, if you have Prime, you can add HBO, Max. It would work that way. And I don't have any expectation that would be exclusive. And so it wouldn't necessarily be the only way you can get it. So, the Amazon involvement with Diamond or the company that Diamond becomes, maybe to some degree was always a little overstated. It certainly looked good to have a big company like that backing. But yeah, at this point, we don't have concrete evidence that Amazon wants to be the next Diamond. That said, we are seeing major streaming companies pursuing these rights in a general sense. So whether that's Amazon or somebody else, if Rob Manfred has enough teams together, yeah, I bet somebody would pay baseball a pretty good amount of money. But how is that money divvied up? Which teams participate? Can you convince the Yankees to participate? Can you convince the Cubs? How do you convince them? How much money do you have to give to them? Again, it's those structural issues.
And on those Diamond bankruptcy proceedings, they have a hearing on November 14th. What's the range of outcomes for what might happen there?
Well, we might get the answer to what's going to happen with baseball before that. So on Thursday of this week, there is an objection deadline, and MLB has a lawyer representing MLB has said in court in pretty clear terms that they are planning to object. But they've also said that they're in discussions with Diamond basically to work out I use the term loosely here, a settlement where they just figure out what's going to happen with the baseball teams that are still with Diamond. So there were 12 teams with Diamond, 12 baseball teams with Diamond last year. 4 have already said they're going elsewhere. We know, or at least believe, that the that the Marlins and the Braves are going to be back with Diamond. So that's 2. And then there are 6 other teams, 6 of the other remaining 8 that we're just not sure where they're going to go. And basically Diamond has said, you're either going to renegotiate your deals or you're not coming back. And so really in very short order here, we might get news about those 6 teams. Do some of them go? Do some of them stay? I imagine it's some sort of split. And some of them that leave probably, presumably, go to MLB, but they don't have to. The Rangers left Diamond, and they're trying to start their own network of sorts. So even before that November 14th deadline, we might have a much clearer picture. Talk about, within a week or maybe just a couple days of what's going to happen.
All right. Well, thank you for chronicling all of it for us. Evan Drellich, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Owen.
Time now for Front Office Sports Tomorrow, where we look ahead to what's coming in the business of sports. FIFA will offer the U.S. media rights for the 2027 and 2031 Women's World Cups as standalone packages, not like they've done in the past as a throw-in with deals for the Men's World Cup rights. The 2027 tournament will be held in Brazil, which is a much better time zone match for the U.S. than the last tournament in Australia, but the real prize is the 2031 rights, when the Women's World Cup is expected to be in the U.S., so that has not been made official just yet. It's just the latest sign that women's sports are growing tremendously in value. That's it for today. Leave us a rating and review wherever you like to tune in or share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening. We will see you tomorrow.